Question Preuve, the anxious lawyer. From the Léo Laporte studio, I am Hugo Martin. I've been practicing law as a litigator since 1997, and I am the founder of Rivercast Media, a podcast production company. I am the host of Question of Proof, or Question of Evidence, a podcast about law and justice by and for lawyers, attorneys, and notaries whose objectives are to advance the practice of law and promote access to justice. Some of our podcasts are eligible for required legal continuing education. Simply point your internet browser to rivercastmedia.com for all the details. Promoting access to justice is a noble objective. In our society, a healthy judicial system is necessary for a functioning democracy. One can also argue that a healthy judicial system requires healthy judges and healthy lawyers. Where am I going with this, you ask? I am today outside the, let's say, regular scope of my regular episodes, where I usually discuss tax, class action, business law, or Supreme Court legal challenges. As most of my close friends, family, and listeners know, I have never hidden the fact that I had some mental health issues, challenges, and in some ways, I sometimes feel that I could fall back again. I have had discussions with Quebec Bar members about mental health, its promotion, and I'm always curious to learn more. On the website Reuters Law, there's a section called Justice Matters. I frequently read it, and I recently came across an article from Hassan Kanu, I hope I'm saying Hassan's last name correctly, that piqued my interest. Hassan's article is titled, "It's Exhausting, Why Women Want Out of the Legal Profession." The first two paragraphs read like this. The result of a recent survey about why lawyers want to leave the profession might have been a surprise to researchers, but Gina Cho is unfazed. It's a recipe for burnout, said the lawyer, who is also the author of The Anxious Lawyer and is a mindfulness instructor working with law firms on well-being. All this said and done, I did what I usually do. Without first reading the book, I contacted Gina Cho. She graciously accepted my invitation to discuss her book, The Anxious Lawyer, an 8-week guide to a happier, saner law practice using meditation. The Anxious Lawyer is a straightforward introduction to meditation and mindfulness for those engaged in the practice of law. Readers are guided through an 8-week program, the aim of which is to assist in establishing an ongoing meditation practice. The book will provide an overview of the history of meditation and the scientific evidence of its benefits. Scientific evidence. You're listening to Question of Evidence, and lawyers really like things that are proven, that are evidence-based. The book will also introduce the reader to simple meditation techniques and offer concrete guidance for establishing a meditation practice. With over 15 years of law practice, Gina is intimately familiar with the struggles as well as the deep satisfaction that comes from being a lawyer. She started her career as an assistant state attorney at the State Attorney's Office, 13th Judicial Circuit, where she handled domestic violence and misdemeanor cases. During that time, she tried over 20 jury trials and hundreds of bench trials. Wanting to make a greater impact, she switched practice areas and started a consumer bankruptcy law practice in San Francisco, where she helped everyday people and small businesses find solutions to overwhelming debt problems. Gina Cho teaches mindfulness and meditation to lawyers. She regularly speaks and writes about wellness, self-care, and mindfulness. She also works with lawyers and law firms on stress management, work-life balance, career transition, increasing productivity, and overall wellness. Gina Cho, thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Hugo. Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about you. Law school, you're a member of the California Bar, I understand, and maybe tell us a little bit about your law practice before we get to the speaker, author part.
Sure. So I graduated from University of Buffalo in Buffalo, New York, obviously. And I started practicing in 2003. I started out my career as an assistant state attorney, and then my husband and I opened up a bankruptcy law practice in 2009. And I was practicing bankruptcy law until about a year ago.
And the anxious lawyer, how do we do the transition from your practice to this?
Yeah, so I think, for a long time I struggled with anxiety and some level of depression, but I was in deep denial about it. Like most lawyers, I valued being strong and being seen as strong and did not think that there was any space in the practice of law for vulnerability. And just got to a point where my mental health state was really starting to creep into every aspect of my life. So I caught myself thinking about work constantly. There was no sort of a point in time where I wasn't thinking about work. I fell asleep thinking about work. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about work. I woke up in the morning thinking about work. I jokingly tell people that I started practicing mindfulness and meditation because I got tired of showering with all of my clients. I don't know if you ever thought about work while you're in the shower.
Constantly, yes.
And there was one particular point in my life where I really realized that I had to get some sort of help or get some sort of handle on my mental health, because remember, I was driving to a hearing, and it was one of those hearings where I knew I was going to lose. Right, you just know, and just everything about the case was challenging and difficult. I was going to appear in front of a judge that I was not a huge fan of. My opposing counsel and I were like oil and vinegar, and we were just not getting along. We were just constantly sending emails back and forth with some level of aggression and trying to express all of our annoyances, via email. And there was a lot riding on the case. I knew most likely I was going to lose at the hearing, and losing the hearing meant that my clients were going to have their home be sold in the bankruptcy case. So I was driving to a hearing, and it started to rain, and I drove by a scene of a car accident. And the first thought that popped into my head was, wouldn't it be great if I got into a car accident? And then my mind played out this whole fantasy of getting into a car accident. I mean, not like a terrible car accident, right? Surely I didn't want to die. But having the ambulance show up, calling the judge's chamber, explaining the situation, and then going to the emergency room and having the doctor tell me, Gina, you were just in a car accident. You really need to rest, and spending the night in the emergency room. And I was so depleted and so exhausted at the time that idea of spending the night in the hospital sounded really great. And the next thought that popped into my head was, these are not healthy thoughts that anyone should have. And I thought, maybe there's something going on that I should pay attention to. But I didn't know exactly what help looked like. I didn't even know where to start. And around the same time, I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and she's a therapist. And I was telling her about all of these issues I was having. I had constant stomach aches and back aches and headaches. I would look at my calendar in the morning and have my stomach drop and have this sinking feeling like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through the day? And I wasn't feeling like myself. I felt kind of muted, like my emotional range was really short. So obviously when you practice bankruptcy law, you come into contact with a lot of human trauma, right? And I think that's one of the things that we don't often think about or talk about as lawyers, is just how much suffering we witness as lawyers. And as you can imagine with bankruptcy law, no one ever comes to see a bankruptcy lawyer with happy news. Often they come to see me because there was an unexpected illness or death or loss of a job or, breakup of a marriage or a business deal that has gone sour. And, I just didn't have a mechanism for processing the suffering that I was witnessing. So I was telling all of this to my friend, a therapist, and she, being a therapist, was very compassionate. And, I was very emotional. And I said, I don't know what to do. I am not feeling good, and I don't even know where to start. And she said, I'm gonna, I'm not going to be a therapist here. I'm going to be your friend. And I'm telling you that you need to go get help. And I said, what help? Like, what does help even look like? And she recommended that I go and check out this anxiety management clinic at Stanford University. I was living in the Bay Area at the time. And so, at like 3 a.m., I think that night or the next night, where I could not fall asleep because I had constant insomnia. Like I said, I wasn't sleeping very well. I wasn't exercising right. I wasn't doing any of the things that I needed to. I went on their website, and they had an intake form. So I filled out the intake form. And, there was a bunch of questions about, your mental health and just, your thoughts and what's going on and sort of the physiological reactions that you have to stress and anxiety. And then a few days later, the therapist from the clinic called me and I went in for some additional evaluation. And then I was eventually diagnosed with social anxiety disorder and depression. And I remember that period being a very dark period of my life because I didn't know any other lawyers at the time. Of course, there are lots of us, right, struggling with mental health issues. I didn't know any other lawyers that was struggling with a mental health issue. I really quite, or admitting, right, I think that's a more accurate term to use, and I didn't know what that meant in terms of my ability to be a good lawyer, to be a competent lawyer. I started to really doubt myself. But I went through the treatment program. It was a very intensive treatment program. And I started to learn all of these skills, right? Mindfulness and meditation, learning about, taking care of my own well-being, looking at the thoughts that are constantly going through my head, just kind of looking at how to manage my own brain in a very holistic way. And I thought, oh my gosh, these are things that every lawyer should know. Why aren't we teaching this stuff in law school? So that really opened up this journey to, doing the work that I'm doing now.
So when I read the little intro to your book, Surfing the Internet, so it's not, you just mentioned that it's for every lawyer, so it's not necessarily genderized, even if at one point we are talking about women, women lawyers are leaving the profession, and it's a recipe for burnout. It's not necessarily gender based. It's your experiences, like all lawyers are feeling this way at one point, or are experiencing some stress and anxiety.
Yeah, it's definitely not gender specific. I think there are, of course, different challenges that women lawyers experience, as well as, BIPOC lawyers, right? And of course, all the different marginalized groups of lawyers, I think, experience the practice of law very differently. But sure, everyone can benefit from the work, and of course, everyone can struggle with mental health issues.
So you decide, as one does, you go through the process, and then you say everybody should know about this, and then you decide to write a book. I'm sure there must be a period of time between the two, and the learning about, and I love the way you're saying it, a meditation practice. We're all law practitioner. I love when you
Yeah.
use. So
Yes. Yeah.
how does that work? What's the
Yeah, so at
process?
the end of the treatment program, I just became completely fascinated. And of course, as lawyers, we're lifelong learners. So I wanted to learn everything there was about mindfulness and meditation. Of course, I'm still on that journey of learning. I went through a teacher training program for mindfulness-based stress reduction. I took like every mindfulness class at Stanford that was open to the public and that I could take. I started going on retreats at various places. But part of the recovery from the anxiety disorder necessarily meant that I had to do the thing that triggered anxiety. It's just kind of counterintuitive, because part of social anxiety is that coming into contact with other human beings in social situations trigger anxiety. So one of my top anxiety triggering event was public speaking. I think most people are fearful of public speaking. But at the end of the treatment program, one of the things that it was a group therapy session. So everyone in the group therapy was invited to continue their journey to healing, right? So they teach you a bunch of different tools, and then they basically tell you, go out and do the things that causes social anxiety. So for some people in the group, it was like going on a date. For other people, it was like talking to a stranger at a grocery line. For me, it was public speaking. And also, of course, like everyday conversations as well. I think what I realized after the fact was that what was happening was, because so many of my communications with my clients were so traumatizing, and deeply painful. I was almost having like a vicarious trauma effect, right? We can certainly talk about vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue and secondary trauma. So part of my coping mechanism was to withdraw from the social situations and not engage, right? Which makes sense. Like you're not going to continue to do the thing that triggers anxiety. So what I committed to doing as part of this class was that I said, I'm going to do one public speaking engagement a month, which was a big deal for me at the time. And, I could have talked about different topics, or I could have talked about bankruptcy law, about building your own law practice. But the topic that I really felt called to talk about was lawyer well-being. And so, I started, I called up I was a chair of my local bar association at the time, the bankruptcy section. And so we, had the opportunity to propose different topics. I said, can I do a workshop on stress and anxiety management for lawyers? And everyone was like, that sounds like a great idea. So I just started doing them. I just started teaching workshops. And then, my workshops were very popular and people liked them. So I just started doing them more and more. And then an editor from the American Bar Association reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in writing a book on this topic? And I thought, sure.
As one does.
So, as one does, yeah.
Well, I've read the book. I've read the book from cover to. I think you do mention it. There's a whole bunch of ways of reading your book, but I've read it cover to cover over 3 days. I was away up north here in province of Quebec, and decided to read the book cover to cover and then do the steps. And I'm glad that you do tell us that it's okay. It's an 8-week program, but we don't have to do it in 8 weeks, and it's probably the right thing to do. But I was very apprehensive before starting recording today. I did tell you, even before contacting you, I was drawn by the little excerpt that says, it's a recipe for burnout, what we do for a living. I was also hooked on the title, The Anxious Lawyer, but I hadn't read the subtitle, or, call it an 8-week guide to a happier, saner law practice. So it's all fine using meditation. So you do understand. So we're evidence-based. You do say it in your book. And I said, okay, here we go. I'm in a cult. And Gina, who have already contacted you, I'm going to read a book about a cult, and we're going to get in through some kind of a never-ending tunnel towards something, that we're going to have to follow. And I was a little bit apprehensive. Obviously, read the book, because just a foreword from by Chris McAlely, judge for the Southern District of Florida, and just the foreword is really, really guiding me to, or putting me in a better place. Tell me a little bit about Chris writing the foreword.
I actually met her at a meditation retreat for lawyers, and we had a connection. And I was also just, and I was a baby meditator at the time, and I was just really so touched and struck by, here's a federal magistrate judge right, attending this meditation retreat for lawyers, and she just has this way about her, and just this calmness, which is, I think, what you want from a judge. This really level-headed, the sense of equanimity. And she was, sharing some of her difficulties in being a judge. Like at any given point, right, you are going to let somebody down. Someone is going to be upset with you. There's no way to make everyone happy. And so when, I started writing the book, I approached her and asked if she would write the foreword to the book, and she very graciously said yes. And, I, of course, wanted her to write the foreword because the weight that it carries, right, to have a federal magistrate judge say that mindfulness and meditation has helped me. And, she certainly goes into all the different ways in which it has helped her in her life. And, it definitely resonates with me as well. But I feel very fortunate to have her write the foreword for the book.
Well, they're all to all my listeners, read the foreword. You're going to be hooked after that. It's not going to be a problem. In your book, and I talked about this a little earlier. You call meditation the meditation practice. Obviously, lawyers are familiar with the word practice. We're all practitioners. We're practicing law. Is there a link between the words? Was it a pun? Was it a play on words? Was it an intentional way of writing this, or just in real life, a meditation is called a meditation practice?
Yes, there is a planned word, but it was also very intentional. People in the meditation circle will often call it a practice because that's what it is. You can't just meditate once. It's sort of a lifestyle. I think being a practicing lawyer is also a lifestyle. And it does require a certain amount of dedication to the art of the practice, whether it be a law practice. So I think the practice, implies this level of devoting yourself and also a dedication to the craft and the art of the practice, whether it be a meditation practice or a law practice, but also a recognition that you're never going to be perfect at it. That's why you practice at it. And then with practice, you become more skillful.
You're right. Anyways, like I said, I love the word. It's really, it brought me in even more. I could reference to it. Quoting the book here, the biggest misconception many professionals hold about meditation is that it's just something they can't do. Tell me, what type of lawyers do you need to be to read your book?
You can be anyone and practice meditation or read the book. A lot of lawyers tell me that they can't meditate because they can't stop thinking, or they tell me they can't meditate because they hate silence. And I think both of those are very, very telling. First of all, if you're thinking, I can't stop my mind from thinking, that's not really the goal of meditation. That's one of the big misperceptions about the practice of meditation. And we can go into, sort of the practical end of how to practice meditation.
We will.
And also, also that idea of being with yourself, right? Your own thoughts, your emotions, your physiological reaction, just being with what is happening in the moment is one of the foundations that you need to tend to your well-being, right? By saying, I can never be alone, sort of with my own thoughts and with myself, you can't create an opportunity for change. Like you can't even start to identify, sort of, I'm using my air quotation mark here, but what the issues are. So that you can even begin to make changes. Often I'll work with lawyers and they'll just come in and they're completely frazzled, right? They're just sort of fraying at the edges, and they'll say, something needs to change. I'm so stressed and I'm so anxious. And if the advice is to just ask some probing questions, like they don't really understand like the details, right? So having a meditation practice is just that, it's just kind of creating this space so that you can look at what's going on with just a little bit of detachment. Because when you're sort of all in it, it's hard to see with clarity what is happening.
I haven't seen your agenda. You haven't seen my agenda, but lawyers are way too busy to start taking time to meditate. I'm sure you've heard this before. We do address it in your book, but aren't we just too busy for this?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the root causes, right, of the incredibly high rate of stress and anxiety and all the other mental health issues for lawyers is because we do value, I think, overwork. We value working sort of around the clock and all the time. And it takes courage to say my own well-being matters, and I need to carve out a little bit of time to tend to my own well-being. I think also part of the thing that we need to look at is when you say I am too busy, like what does that really mean? I think some of it is this feeling like, well, I have to be busy because it means that I am valuable and I'm valued. And if I'm not super busy all the time, it means I'm less valuable. I think there is that sort of judgment or that sort of like false sense as well. I think you're just kind of looking at that statement. What does that mean? I am too busy. And what are you saying no to when you say I'm too busy?
Yeah, your answer is making me even more open. So let's do the steps a little bit the way I've taken them. Now I'm telling you, all right, Gina, we're open to the idea and we're ready to try. What do I need to do? What do I need as tools? What do I need as space? I don't want to dig too deep now. I just want to go to my colleagues and I want them to listen to this podcast and say, okay, we are in the beginning of stages of building a meditation practice. What are the useful tools?
Well, the good news is that you don't need anything really. The only thing that you need truly to practice is your mind and your body. And all of us have that available to us in every moment. There are some helpful tools and items that may make your practice more comfortable. So I think having a dedicated time every day when you sit is important. I usually meditate first thing in the morning because that's and I think that's a good time for most people. And please don't take anything that I'm about to suggest here as like as being prescriptive, right? They're all suggestions. So having a certain time of the day when you practice, having a fairly quiet space is also good. I also have a toddler, so often she's running around and I'm meditating and she's running around, and that's also fine. Having something to sit on, so whether that's just your office chair or your couch even, or some people may prefer to lie down and do the practice, or you can also get like a fancy meditation cushion if that's something you want to invest in. Having a timer is also helpful. It can be your kitchen timer. There's like 1,000 different apps on your phone that you can use for a meditation practice, so that when the meditation will end. And then do you want me to go into sort of the logistical end of how to meditate, or do you want me to just
Well, we're gonna so I'm taking a step-by-step approach, so I think we're gonna talk about this a little further down the podcast, but I'm really liking what you're telling us here. So basically anywhere, fairly quiet, but doesn't have to be completely dark room with padded walls. But you're basically telling us a couch, a chair, lying down, sitting down, kneeling. There's as long as you're comfortable. That's basically what you're telling us. Now that I have the intention, now I'm okay. I'm open-minded. I'm ready to try it. It's an 8-week program, 350 pages book, a little bit more. What are you telling us? What is it that I need to do for week 1? And we will talk about the weeks, because I don't think I'm wrong if I'm telling you right now, Gina, that I'm stuck in week 4. Stuck in the sense that I'm continuing on week 4. And we've, I don't remember, it's been about 2 months that we contacted each other. I'm still on week 4. Not that I haven't read the entire book, but now week 1, what do we do? What do we do? I need to sit down for an hour a day?
Yeah. Week 1 is titled Beginning to Meditate. So it's just this very gentle invitation to start your meditation practice. I think the most important thing to remember about a meditation practice, whether it's starting a meditation practice or continuing a meditation practice, is to be gentle with yourself. And especially as lawyers, I find so many lawyers have this really unrealistic expectation about what their meditation practice is going to look like. They say, I'm going to start meditating an hour a day. Right? For some people, that may be fine. I think for most people, that's probably unrealistic. But also, I think when they meditate, there's this expectation that they do it perfectly. Because I think that's sort of the mentality we bring into our law practice. I can't make a mistake. I have to do this perfectly. So tell me all the exact, precise steps so I don't screw this up. And when you notice those thought patterns coming up, what meditation teaches us is that it uncovers our thought process. And so you might start to see, oh, these are habitual thought patterns that I have all the time. Like I can't screw up. For me, there were a lot of thoughts about fear of not being enough. So a lot of thoughts around I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good at this, right? I don't have the right credentials, I didn't go to the right law school, whatever, English wasn't my native language, so I can't do this. The other person went to Harvard, whatever, right? Those thoughts are. You will notice those type of thoughts coming up in your meditation practice. And then rather than getting discouraged and say, I can't do this, I'm not doing this right, I'm terrible at this, I can't even do this right, you learn to say, I'm just practicing. What can I do to be kind to myself? What can if this was a friend that was struggling with her or his meditation practice or their meditation practice, what would I tell them? And then likely you're never going to tell your friend, oh, you know what, you should just quit because you're a terrible meditator, right? So, bringing this attitude of this gentle invitation, it's almost like you're inviting yourself down for tea and saying, hey, let's just sit down, like you're inviting someone that you truly love, right? And say, hey, sit down, have a cup of tea, like tell me what's going on. It's like this very gentle opening to your inner world.
Is there a when, how often, a where? What's the moment of choice? How do you get the habit started? How do you find that time and that place? How do you set it up?
Yeah, my recommendation is to try it for just a few minutes a day and every day, or as close to every day as possible. It's much better to do a minute of practice a day for 30 days than it is to do, let's say, 30 minutes once a month. Right? So having a consistent practice, as close to a daily practice as possible. As I mentioned, having a set time every day is really helpful. The trick that worked for me in terms of habitualizing my meditation practice is I love drinking coffee in the morning. Like that is my highlight of my day.
I'll do.
And so I just have a standing rule, no meditation, no coffee. So, I sit for a couple of minutes in the morning and then I go and, make my coffee. And then sometimes I'll go outside and sit with my cup of coffee and then, and then I might drink a little bit and then I might close my eyes and just meditate for a couple more minutes. But linking it to an existing habit is always helpful. If you brush your teeth in the morning, you can do that. If you want to meditate at night, again, like brushing your teeth or something that you do every day, whether it's showering or feeding your dog or something that you already do every day, because it'll serve as a trigger.
You talked about earlier having some kind of a time tracking device, and now I'm glad that you're already saying a couple of minutes a day. A couple of minutes in the morning, a couple of minutes at night, so it's not going to be time consuming. What do we do for time tracking? Do we write it down? What is your suggestion? Do I have an app on the side and say, okay, I did 2 minutes at 8 this morning and I was in on my cushion in the living room? Do you suggest that?
I use a timer called Insight Timer. It's just what I use. There, as I mentioned, there are lots of them out there. I like Insight Timer, honestly, because you can see, like, I like data. So it gives you a data about, this is a total number of hours you've meditated. And, I have like thousands of hours and, these are the total number of weeks. And then you get streaks for, if you meditate every day for 10 days or 30 days or, 100 days. And then also you get gold stars. They're not quite gold, but you get a star for when you meditate. And I just feel like as adults, we just need someone to be like, you did a good job today.
Correct.
You
Let's
get a
gamify
star.
the entire thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. But if a manual journal works for you, that's also fine. I've also done that over time. You can get a daily journal and just write down a couple words about your meditation practice. Insight Timer also allows you to do that. So I often use that feature.
Okay. I love the fact that you wrote it in the book. Weeks are not set in stone. My first week can last a month, and it's okay. That's what you're actually saying to your readers. It's okay. It's important that you just get into the habit. Any challenges, any common challenges that you can tell us about, getting through week one so people can know that's normal to go through some kind of a challenges?
Yeah, there are a few different, fairly common challenges that beginner meditators can often experience. One of the most common ones is feeling sleepy. I feeling that comes up a lot. So if you notice you're feeling sleepy or you actually fall asleep during your meditation, please know that that's totally normal and very, very common. A few different things that you can try if this is an issue for you. One is to just check your posture and sit up a little bit taller. Sometimes when we slouch, that makes it more likely that you'll either fall asleep or feel more sleepy. You can also try opening your eyes a little bit to let some light in, and that might help. You can also just stand up and meditate. You just don't want to lock your knees because you don't want to fall over. And the last thing is if you're regularly falling asleep during your meditation, you might look at your sleep habit.
I was going to say sleep a
You know,
little bit
some
more.
sleep a little bit more. And then also, finally, meditating first thing in the morning often helps because, sometimes when we try to meditate at the end of the day, it's more likely to fall asleep. Although that can also be a really lovely benefit of meditation, especially if you're like me and you struggle with insomnia.
Good. You've taken our hand for week one, and I got it. I said, okay, it's an introduction. She's being very gentle, I would say, with us. I got to say, I love the second week. The second week was where it started to get some kind of a result to establishing a meditation practice. It's called mindfulness. In your book, the definition: a particular state of mind, a way of being, a way to engage with the world. It's often defined as being aware of the present moment without judgment or preference. Tell me about mindfulness. Second week, loved it.
I realized that so much of my anxiety and also stress I was experiencing because my mind was constantly someplace different than where I am physically. And perhaps your listeners can relate to this as, you might be thinking about a hearing and the hearing, right, maybe several months away. And then each time your mind rehearses what's going to happen at the hearing, your mind only focuses on the negative. It only focuses on the worst case scenario. And of course, that's a recipe for increasing stress and anxiety. Now, if your mind is being productive and actually thinking about, some legal issue in the case or an unfavorable, case law against your case, or maybe, a statement that your witness has said that is unfavorable to your case, and you're trying to think of a different strategizing, that's different. But the mind has this, very unique ability to just loop, have these thought loops over and over and over again. Yeah. And the way that this often comes up for me, I have a 2-year-old, and of course 2-year-olds are always in the present moment, right? And she'll be doing, running around the living room, and then I'll sometimes catch myself and say, oh, in this moment I'm in the living room and I'm playing with my daughter, but my mind has sort of drifted away and is thinking about whatever, right? Some event from the past, maybe a hearing that I lost 10 years ago, or maybe an unpleasant conversation that I need to have next week. And so, kind of returning back to what is actually happening in this moment. And it could be, right, that you're, in the middle of a hearing and the judge just asked you a question and you're trying to formulate a response. But if that's not where you are physically in that moment, but your mind is there, it's sort of recognizing when there's that disconnect between where you are physically and where your mind is, and then returning back to the present moment. But with this sense of compassion, I think that's the other part of the definition that we don't often pay attention to. It's, we can sort of show up for the moments in our lives with different filters or different lenses. You may be having a conversation with someone and you may be very biased because of some past experience. And so, just bringing compassion into each moment.
I loved reading the book and rereading a week too, and being able to notice that, first of all, I'm not in the present moment very often. So that was very important. And at the same time, I realized that I'm kind of like meditating without meditating, just like realizing at this particular moment that I am not in the moment. And, you call it off the cushion. It's kind of going through your regular day meditation. Like it's like, just like you meditate, but nothing has changed in your day. And I love that. The fact that at one point I realized that, okay, how can I be in the present moment? And the mindfulness week was a great waker-upper, if I could say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, every moment is an invitation to be mindful. With the pandemic, one of the things that I really started to pay attention to is hand washing. Now, sometimes, I mean, we can just sort of go through the habit or the practice of washing our hands sort of mindlessly. Put the soap on, you turn the water on, and you just kind of rush through it. But if you just give yourself a moment to slow down and actually take an extra second to really feel the soap on your hand and the texture and how it feels on your skin, noticing the temperature of the water, and then noticing the texture of the towel as you dry off your hand. These little moments can really be very pleasurable and like joy inducing just by paying a little bit closer attention to it. Things like eating, certainly, right, can be a great practice for mindfulness and a source of joy.
You're right. I've never thought about this before. What about clients? So we need to be sharp. So mindfulness is kind of a little bit at the same time is realizing that I'm not in the present moment. Like I wrote in the script, mindfulness is great, but we need to check in with reality sometimes. Are you telling us that mindfulness and meditation can help us with clients and client engagement? I know the answer is yes, but give us some example in real life. How does mindfulness and meditation, how is it going to help me in my everyday law practice?
Yeah. Wow, there's so many different examples I can give. I think the first example that I'll share is just how we show up for our clients. I was noticing that often I had these sort of a set of beliefs or these like habitual thought patterns that I had about clients. I was almost like stereotyping them, or I would always like rush, right? Because we're lawyers and we're busy, and maybe you're sitting with the client and it's your first time meeting them, and you want to just like pump them for information. Just give me the facts. But of course, our clients are humans, and I found that often they need to just sort of tell their story in the way that it makes sense to them, not the way that I need the information so I can write the complaint, for example. And so it really helped me to be more attentive and just be more open-minded. And my clients have said things like, "Oh, you're such a good listener. I feel like it's like you're like better than my therapist," or they'll say, I met with other lawyers and I felt like I wasn't heard. You're just treating me like a human being. And also when we sort of get out of that mental fog of, just how our mind sort of works, it also opens up different ways to be creative. I've come up with just some brilliant ways of solving a really, really, complicated case issue in my meditation practice. I mean, that's not why I meditate, but and I think a lot of people can relate to that experience. It's like your mind is like chewing over some problem, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go take a shower, and you come up with that insight.
All right, everybody. At this particular moment, Gina's iPod's battery went dead, so we took a moment. She changed microphone, and we resumed the conversation about her book, The Anxious Lawyer.
Another example I'll share with you is a lawyer who was in one of my meditation classes, and he was actually told to begin to meditate by his cardiologist because he had such high blood pressure and because he was just so stressed out. And then he said, my doctor told me I need to start meditating, or I was going to need to have like, like surgery. And so he like very begrudgingly decided to meditate. And he said, I think meditation is going to just make me soft. And he said, I am a criminal defense lawyer. And I am like, he was just one of those people, like super wired, really, really great lawyer, but super aggressive. And I said, well, let's just go through the class. It was an 8-week class. We were following the book. And I said, if at any point you feel like this is like making you soft or is changing you in a way that you feel uncomfortable, you can always just stop, but at least just try it. And, he very begrudgingly did. And he said, I'm not going to start being nice to my opposing counsel. And, I'm not going to go soft. And I said, none of those things are required because we meditate. And, so we were kind of going through class, and one day he came into class and he was so excited. And he said, Gina, I realized that, because, he's a criminal defense lawyer, so he had to drive through like a bunch of different courthouses. He would drive from like one county to the next county. And he said, I realized when I drive and I get road rage, because you can just imagine, right? Here's this person super like wired. And he said, I would just like curse at the other drivers, and I would honk my horn, and I would just get super angry. And then I would show up at the courthouse and I was all flustered because I was screaming at the drivers on the road. And he said, I just started driving and I took some deep breaths. And I realized that, I was stuck in traffic and other people were stuck in traffic. So we were all in this traffic together, and no amount of me honking my horn was going to get me there faster. So he said, I just sort of worked on my breathing, and then I showed up at the courthouse and I was like really calm, and I was able to focus on my case, and I won. And he was like just so happy. And he started to find other parts of his life, right, where he realized, oh, I don't need to go through my life with so much aggression. And I thought that was such a perfect example, and it actually helped him to be a better lawyer.
It is a little bit. It did cross my mind. I'm a litigator. It did cross my mind that it was going to make me soft, but it's not about this. So if we continue to week 3 with me, it's not on the 15th day, so the third week. It was a little longer than this on my end to get through week 3, because the mindfulness part, I loved it, and at the same time it just became some kind of a little bit of a habit. So week 3 kind of got me something else. First of all, you got me right away because you add a quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a French guy, who said the freedom of the mind, la liberté d'esprit, is the only freedom. So this is how you start week 3 of your book, on clarity. Tell me why clarity, and why is it the third stage? I could have seen it a little later.
I don't know that we had some like grand scheme for why we picked week 3 as clarity. It just felt like the right time, because by this point you've been meditating for 2 weeks, and when you meditate, you start to just sort of see like, oh, these are different thought patterns that I have. These are different habits of the mind that I'm noticing. And it's like when you can begin to see things for what they are and have some level of clarity, and starting to see like, oh, a lot of my emotional experience, or what I'm experiencing, is how I'm interpreting the event. And also, what is my reaction? Mm-hmm. And it creates this opportunity for a different response. So you start to see like, oh, when A happens, I always react by doing B. And what would happen if I try C, D, or E, right? It kind of creates this window where, we can think about things slightly differently, or see things from a different perspective, and starting to see, these different habits that we have.
Gina, you just said it, start thinking a little bit differently. I want to ask you, what's the difference between just simply thinking through your stuff, and clarity? Should I identify thinking versus clarity when I'm clearing my mind and I'm meditating or I'm thinking about what's coming or what is around me right now?
I love this question. Analogy that it's often used is if you think about like a jar and there's let's say you put a scoop of dirt in it with water, and you shake up the jar, right? And so I mean, those dirt particles are basically like sort of the business of the mind that you experience. And when we practice mindfulness, when we practice meditation, practice being in the present moment, we're practicing allowing all of those dirt sediments to settle on the bottom. And then you can see the clear water, which remains on top. A really good example that is coming to mind is when I began to meditate, and I mentioned this earlier. I had this deeply held belief that I am somehow like defective, like that there was something fundamentally flawed about me. And I had to sort of overcompensate to overcome that flaw, right? And so you could just imagine like that's the lens in which I was practicing law. That's the lens in which I was experiencing friendships and marriage, and right. And it's not possible to see what is happening in my life with clarity if that's the lens that I'm constantly looking through my life with. And so I had to really let that belief go, and then all the associated thoughts that went along with that belief, right? And I mentioned a lot of them earlier, this feeling of like not being good enough, not being smart enough. So often how that showed up is like I had to sort of, I became really defensive. For one, my opposing counsel might just say something that he didn't mean as like an insult, but I interpreted it as that because again, I had that belief. It's like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And so then it kind of hurt me in more deeply than it otherwise would, because there was that like hidden button almost. But also I would like overcompensate by working more, or really just sort of doing things to this like almost like an obsessive level that wasn't necessary.
Yeah, thank you. That's a little bit more clear. You're bringing clarity. See where I'm going. Week 4 and 5. Now, I'm going to have to admit something to you, and you're going to understand why I told you earlier that I was kind of stuck on week 4. Week 4, compassion towards other. Week 5, self-compassion. So, like week 5 seems a little bit like week 4. We understand towards other and self-compassion. I'm kind of stuck on week 4 because I kind of like it. I'm kind of like, I love the fact, for a long time doing commercial litigation in my practice, sometimes you feel that you're not bringing much to society. When you do collection for banks, it's not exactly, an important part of society. At the same time, I'm starting, when I started the podcast, it was a little bit for access to justice. So I love the compassion to others. I'm trying to work towards this, and I try to help people around me. Some challenges arose a couple months ago with my father. My mother passed away. So obviously there's a lot of things that I want to start doing now. The compassion towards other, the helping side of it. The problem with self-compassion is that, okay, now why I'm stuck on week 4, and I'm admitting it right now to you, Gina, is that that means that I need to start working on myself. And this is a little bit more of a challenge, for lawyers. It's like, okay, now am I admitting that something is wrong with me? I'll need to find my flaws, my weaknesses. And this is one of the reasons why I'm stuck on week 4. And at the same time, because you do tell us that the weeks are not set in stone, so it's kind of an easier way of going through the 8 weeks of the practice. We'll go to week 6, which is the one that scares me the most. But so tell me about compassion towards other, week 4, and tell me about compassion or self-compassion, week 5.
Compassion is such a fundamental human need and a human trait. We're all born with the ability and the capacity to be compassionate. It's such a beautiful practice of recognizing suffering, recognizing pain. And when I use that word suffering, I think it can have different connotations for people. But what I'm talking about is like any discomfort, any pain, maybe a physical illness. It could just be, just a bad day that you had. It could be, a loved one that's going through some type of illness. And then with COVID, right, there's so many people that are suffering right now. And sometimes it can just feel overwhelming, just the sheer amount of suffering that is all around us. And there's this really beautiful compassion meditation practice that goes along with both compassion towards others and the compassion towards self. So when we talk about compassion, there's basically 4 different prongs. One is just seeing the suffering, right? Often when we see suffering, we can turn away from it or deny it, or all the different sort of coping mechanisms we may employ. And 2 is recognizing that suffering is part of life. So it's not, so in some ways it's not personal, right? Suffering isn't like, sometimes it can be like, oh, why me? Why is this happening to me? But also like suffering is a thing that binds us to each other, because it's it's this like experience that we have, and the experience of suffering is going to be in some ways unique to us, right? Because they're our own, but also that recognizing that there are other people in the world that may be experiencing similar suffering, I think can often offer this some level of relief, just seeing like, oh, this isn't only happening to me. And then third is, just seeing like what can I do to help? What can I do to alleviate the suffering? Yeah. And then finally, it's taking some proactive step for alleviating the suffering. So I'll give you an example. As I took an 8-week compassion class at Stanford, and it's all about expanding your capacity to be compassionate, and you learn different meditation techniques for practicing compassion. And I kind of learned the 4 prongs of compassion, and around the same time, a good friend of mine was going through cancer, and it was a terminal cancer, so we knew that she was going to die at some point. And I remember just feeling this incredible amount of like helplessness, because she lived far away and there wasn't, there's like not much I can do, and feeling this level of distress of, seeing this dear friend going through this incredible amount of pain and suffering. And one of the things that I started to do was the compassion practice. So, when you do the compassion practice, you bring the person into your mind, and then you offer these really beautiful words and phrases of well wishes. So even though there was nothing like physically that I could really do to help her, when I sat in my meditation every day, I would think about my friend, and then I would, say these phrases like, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, may you be healthy, may you know ease and joy. And that's something, and oftentimes, I actually thought of different things that I could do for her, sending her a little note or well wishes, right? Because that person was on my mind. So it kind of did like 2 things. It gave me like a proactive thing that I could do, which was this meditation practice. And I like to think that it touched her in some way as well. And then, just sort of beyond that, because she was on my mind and I was thinking about her, it led to me being able to think of different things that I could do aside from the meditation practice.
I love the compassion part, the way you write it in the book as well. It was really touching. But let's move on. Week 6. Now, when I started this, okay, we're moving into guru territory. Mantra, big word that was a little bit scary to me. So no, I'm not going to start doing this. I'm not going to start doing a mantra in my head, and then next thing you know, I'm going to have to follow somebody else. It's not that. It's not as scary as I just said. But can you walk us through the week 6, which is the mantra repetition, and what is it? What is it in real life? What does it look like?
So a mantra is just a word or phrase that you repeat in your mind over and over and over again. So there is this devotional quality to it. And the reason why we do the mantra practice is because it gives the mind something very concrete to do. It's really helpful when your mind just feels restless. I think this is something that a lot of lawyers experience. They notice, almost to the degree of being like obsessive, repeating thoughts. Maybe the judge or someone, the opposing counsel said something to you, and then you're just so angry about it, and your mind just keeps thinking about that event over and over and over and over again. I don't know if this has ever happened to you.
Correct.
And when you notice this, you can't just tell your mind, like, stop thinking that. It's like saying, like, don't think of a pink elephant. Your mind is so stuck on that thought. And the mantra practice is a really soothing practice that you can offer to your mind. So, when I'm noticing my mind doing its thing, and it's like thinking about conversation that I had, or just typically it's like negative emotional content, right? Is what the mind wants to get stuck on, because we're hardwired to pay closer attention to negative information than positive information. And so so a mantra could be something like be here or let go. There's a lot of different like Sanskrit mantras that you can also practice. And
There's Pali as well. I think you did say
yeah,
the Sanskrit and Pali. Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And so every time your mind is doing that repeated, almost like that obsessive thinking pattern, you just bring your mind back to the mantra. And this is also helpful in a meditation practice, especially when your mind feels very busy or your mind is racing.
I'm seeing it. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm because I like the part in the book, the off the cushion. So a daily activity. I like the fact of the mantra can help as well when you're not. Am I saying it right? When you're not meditating, you understand? Like when I am not sitting down or lying down or kneeling down to meditate, the mantra repetition could be an off the cushion meditation while you're not meditating. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
it could be, yes, it could be an off the cushion or an informal mindfulness practice. And yeah, it's and honestly, what I would tell any of your listeners is that if you feel skeptical about any of this, but there's a part of you that's interested, try it, right? Try it for 30 days, try it for 60 days, and see for yourself whether this mindfulness and meditation is a helpful tool for you. And you can use something like a mantra, and you can think of one that works for you. The two that I usually use is let go. It's really helpful when my mind is stuck on something, and you just repeat the mantra and over again. Typically you want to synchronize it with your breath. So with the in breath you might say let, and then with the out breath say go. And you just with the breath and just kind of synchronize, and there's a whole body of research around how mindfulness and meditation actually changes your physiology. So there's like basically two modes in our nervous system. There's a sympathetic nervous system, which is also known as like the fight or flight response, and then there's a parasympathetic nervous system, which is also called rest and digest mode. And tons of research shows that when you're meditating, it engages the parasympathetic nervous system. So you're actually switching your nervous system from being in this like fight or flight, the stressed out mode, to like, rest and digest mode. And our bodies are designed to spend majority of its time in the parasympathetic nervous system mode. But because we live in this era with smartphones and emails and text messages and all of these stuff that's happening, even though our bodies are not in physical danger, we're reacting as though there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing us. So when I ask people like, what do you notice when you feel stressed? Very common answers are, I notice my heart beating, my stomach gets tightening, I start to sweat, I notice my muscles tense up, right? Those are all your body's response to protect you from a physical danger. Those reactions are not helpful if you need to respond to an email, for example, right? So the mindfulness meditation practice is really, really helpful for returning the mind back to the parasympathetic nervous system. So, that's sort of the science behind why the mindfulness meditation works. And if you look, like go on Google and type in fMRI studies for mindfulness and meditation, you'll see, there's kind of incredible. It literally changes your brain. So the part of the brain that's responsible for the fight or flight reaction, the amygdala, actually calms down after a regular meditation. It becomes less active. So I think just sort of learning a little bit about the science of it and learning why it works is really persuasive.
I'm loving it. I'm loving that you're giving us evidence. Lawyers love evidence. I have two questions for you. The first one is that I wanted to ask you if you can share your mantra with other people. Well, I didn't know that let go, which is in your book, was one of your mantra, because you just saying you can use this mantra. I didn't know that was one of your mantra. Thank you for sharing. So I guess it is open to tell other people we can, what our mantra or our mantras are. I got to tell you that I wasn't sure if it was going to be used in a meditation practice, part of the meditation practice, or it had to be some kind of, it's another one, so my morning one could be something a little bit more mindful, a little bit more being in the present, breathing. You do talk about breathing, and I thought that the mantra repetition had to be in another sit down or another meditation moment of my day or of my week. So you're telling us that it could be in the same practice, it could be off the cushion, it could be, in court while I'm waiting. That I love that part, like while you're waiting to go to court, you can, repeat your mantra, and sometimes it's going to help you. But you're telling us that it can be incorporated in your meditation practice.
Yes. Yeah, you can use the mantra in your meditation practice, or you can also use it in your daily life. I often use the one let go, and then there's also a Sanskrit one, soham, which loosely translates into I am that, or that is who I am. And I like that one because sometimes sometimes I feel angry, or I feel sad, or whatever the emotional descriptors are, and those feelings can be really unpleasant, and sometimes it's hard to get yourself untangled from those emotional experiences. And so I use the mantra soham, and it's this reminder that those emotional experiences are not who I am. They're passing phenomena. Same thing for happiness and joy and like every emotion, but at the core, that's not who I am. I'm not sort of my past experiences, right? So I think it's just a lovely reminder of your true essence, like who you really are.
What you're saying to me now, what's in your book, you're reaching me, and I'm the average lawyer with, sometimes I'm anxious, sometimes I'm stressed, sometimes I don't want to do this, sometimes I'm thrilled to do what I'm doing. It's for us lawyers, and the way you're sharing your information is really, really, really nice to hear. Week 7, artfulness. Again, reading the title sent me straight to thinking about, what about my head? We're lawyers. We're into thoughts, and we have no heart or emotions. We need to, argue our case. But then I realized that you're a lawyer also, and you're addressing in week 7 heartfulness. And heartfulness is throughout the book. We can, it's everywhere in your book. But tell me, head versus heart. You're a lawyer, and me, I'm saying, okay, she's wrong because heartfulness has no place in my legal practice. But I must be wrong because you're a lawyer and you can have heartfulness integrated in your life and in your meditation practice. Can you tell me a little bit more about this?
Maybe a different word to use might be courage. It's this feeling of like showing up with a level of bravery and courage, and sometimes the courage to do things that are difficult. So it's of course heart-based because it has that word heartfulness. But when you think about your physical heart, right? I mean, it is one of the strongest muscles in your body, and it has been beating from the moment that you were born and has right, been beating throughout your life. And there's this, and when I think about heartfulness, I think about just the fact that the heart, which produces circulates blood in your body, and also is part of the breath. And it's just this reminder that I'm alive, and two, is that in this moment, like no matter whatever is happening in this moment, right? I have my breath, my heart is still beating, and how do I want to show up in this moment? It's this really strong quality of I almost think about like a samurai warrior. It's like it's this level of like dedication to to your values and showing up with this strong quality of heartfulness. It's like courage and compassion combined.
That's nice. I have so many other questions because, I get the chance to speak to the author of a book that I'm into right now, but I don't want to dig too deep in the book because I want this episode to be about some kind of an introduction to mindfulness and meditation for lawyers. You have a section called Practicing Law to Serve Your Higher Goals. I thought that this section was compelling. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, and just sort of what you shared about how you felt about your work kind of reminded me of that. I think it's just this reminder that no matter what your job is within the legal context, there is this almost I'm about to use a word that I think can have different connotations, but almost like a spiritual, it's like this feeling of being part of something that is greater than yourself, and being part of what is really an incredibly noble profession. And there's a lot of opportunities to do good, and also that we can't fully know sort of the impact of the work that we do. Right, we may not be able to see sort of how our work impacts the world around us.
So you're leading us to week 8 or chapter 8. It does not mean that we're really in the 8th week of our a meditation practice. We could be in week 10, 12, or 16. That's where I am right now. But week 8, we're at the gratitude stage of a meditation practice. Without spoiling the conclusions, tell us about that section of the book, the leading out or, the final arguments on your book.
Yeah. There's so many research out right now about the powerful impact of practicing gratitude. As I mentioned earlier, we are hardwired. We have this thing called the negativity bias. So we always tend to focus on the negative and just all the things that aren't right. And if we can just kind of take a step back and count our blessings and just remind ourselves of the work that we get to do and just the privilege that that brings, and also just training your mind a little bit so that it's not always focusing on all the different things that aren't right with our life, and just thinking about maybe a different way of thinking about it. Sometimes like that word gratitude doesn't really resonate with people, and so another question you might ask is those like pausing to notice those moments of joy. really, owning joy, owning gratitude, owning the positives in your life, owning the things that you want more of, rather than just pecking at the negatives or the things that aren't quite right in your life.
Nice. We're going to take a short break in a couple of minutes, but tell us what's next after 8 weeks. Where do lawyers go from there? What do I do? I've read your book. I've done the 8 weeks. What do I do after? You have to tell us. You have to tell us what's the sequel. What's the next step?
I think the 8th week is the longest week because it's the practice for the rest of your life. As we said in the beginning, this is a lifelong practice. It's a dedication and something that, it's part of who you are and part of what you do. So I hope that, what the book ultimately does is to help the readers create a meditation practice that will be a lifelong journey.
Great. So, listener, we're with Gina Cho. She is the author of The Anxious Lawyer, an 8-week guide to a happier, saner law practice using meditation. We're going to take a short break, and after the break, we're going to ask Gina to lead us to our first meditation session. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute or so. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, Gina Cho, for sharing her insights and talking about her book, The Anxious Lawyer. This will be my first English ad read, and this episode is brought to you by Restaurant Icanos Restaurant in Montreal. Icanos is now presenting 2 different menus. One is the regular, or the one that people know most, so the Icanos menu, and there's also Yuno Sushi. Icanos, one of Montreal's best seafood destination, is now going Greek, comfort food, and sushi. So like I said earlier, the first part is still the Icanos proper, where you can order one of the best grilled octopus in town, sea bass or gilthead bream, baked whole in the restaurant's Jasper charcoal oven, as well as several raw dishes including tuna, salmon, and oyster. There's also the kefi part with a menu fashioned after Greek tavern. It's a little bit more of a homecoming for the chef Constant Menzas and his Greek roots. As for the Yuno sushi part, Yuno means capable in Japanese, which is also what Icanos means in Greek, capable. Icanos is offering sushi, a natural progression from the seafood of Icanos. Chef Constant Menzas tells us that he worked with ingredient that speaks to him. When it comes to sauces, for example, he has ponzu with pomegranate, tonkatsu with figs. The idea is to keep it simple and clean, but with a little Greek twist. Icanos is open for takeout and delivery. As for the dining room, it is closed on Monday, Tuesday, and Sunday, open for lunch and dinner Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and open for dinner on Saturdays. Icanos Restaurant, for more information, call 514-842-0867 or go to promo.icanos.ca, promo.ikanos.ca. Well, thank you very much, listeners. We're back. Gina, thank you for this. Now I ask you to guide us through a simple, maybe the simplest of meditation practice that you've ever done. Anything you feel appropriate for the media of podcasting, I will be your student and you will be my guide.
All right, so let's do this. So as I mentioned, you don't need any special equipment or tools to meditate. You have everything that you need, which is your mind and body. So let's just start by taking 3 deep breaths. So breathing in and breathing out. And 2 more, breathing in deep. And breathing out long. And 1 more, breathing in deep. And breathing out long. And if it feels comfortable for you, you can allow your eyes to soften And if that is not supportive for you, you can find the gaze about 3 to 4 feet in front of you and focus your attention on that spot. And let's just start the practice by noticing how you are in this moment. So, noticing your posture, noticing how you're sitting. And if it feels good, making any adjustments that you would like. So, you might sit up a little bit taller, you might roll your shoulders back and open up your chest area. You might adjust the position of your legs or your hips, or your torso or your head. And so finding a position that feels comfortable for you. And opening up your awareness and noticing whatever it is that you can observe using all of your senses. You might notice different sounds, different thoughts. Notice different physical sensations. So just allowing whatever experience or thoughts or emotions or feelings that may arise and just allowing them to come and go. And now let's expand the awareness to include the breath. So you don't need to breathe in any special way. The body knows how to breathe. But simply breathing your attention to the breath. So feeling the body breathing in and out. With each inhalation, the body draws in fresh energy. And with each exhalation, the body releases what it no longer needs. And so just bringing your attention to this natural rhythm of the breath. Breathing in and out. And in a moment, we'll close the practice. But before we do, I invite you to check in and see if there's anything that you would like to take with you from this practice, or anything that you would like to let go of. And now let's close the practice by wiggling the fingers and toes. And stretch if it feels good to you. And whenever you feel ready, allow the eyes to open.
Thank you, Gina. This belongs to me. It's a great feeling. Thank you for. I wish I wish you could. Can you call me every morning?
I actually do offer a daily live Zoom meditation session. So you could join me every morning if you wanted to.
Great. Just share that with us, and we'll put it in the show notes. Because as usual, everything that I talk about in the podcast with my guests is appearing in the show notes. And we'll get your book. We'll talk about this a little bit later. But and anything that you can share with us is going to be shared with our audience. So thank you again, Gina. This is very nice. But you are not off the hook. Every episode, every guest that comes to the podcast shares with us what we call l'outil du praticien, or the practitioner's tool. Is there a tool that you use that is not only necessary in your law practice, but something that is imperative in your professional life? It could be a thing, a book, a friend, a mentor, anyone or anything that you cannot live without in your professional life. I think I know where you're going to go. So tell us, share with our audience what is a necessary part of your professional life.
I think this is a part of my life period, but reminding myself to pause and take just 3 deep breaths, just like we did at the beginning of the meditation. And there's a whole science behind it, and how it activates the vagus nerve in the body and how it helps to calm the body. But especially when I feel like I'm, spiraling and I'm, just having one of those moments, the first tool that I reach for is to just pause and take 3 deep breaths. It's like that saying, like, count to 10 before you say something when you're angry.
Or don't tweet drunk.
Right. Yeah. It's just this reminder to, at that moment of pause before you react.
Yes. Thank you. You're so right. We forget we're lawyers. We're always in our minds, and we're selling our minds. We're selling our thoughts. We're selling our thought process, and it's important to take a breath. And sometimes, it could be 3 long breaths. That's not going to take a long time in your day. As for me, Gina, you're gonna let me talk about a program that is offered by the Quebec Bar Association. So this week, what I want to share with you, dear listeners, is not necessarily something that I use every day because it's hard for me to come up with a tool from week to week. But I want the Quebec Bar members to know that there is help for your mental health challenges. The Quebec Bar has in its resources for lawyers section of its website a page that is called Espace Bien-être Psychologique, psychological well-being space, if I can translate. It's a safe space. There are numerous resources like experts to understand, tools to heal, and to help detect the signals and understand the manifestations of psychological distress, articles by collaborators of the Centers for Studies on Human Stress, and video clips with Rose-Marie Charret, who's a psychologist, and where she talks about breaking taboos and isolation. Members of the legal community deliver sensitive and impactful testimony to educate their peers. And also, should you need help and talk to someone, there's PAMBA, P-A-M-B-A. Le PAMBA is a free service. It provides listening, help, and consultation to members and trainees of the Quebec Bar who experience problems of stress, exhaustion, burnout, depression, addictions to alcohol or drugs, or any other problems endangering their psychological balance. PAMBA can be reached in complete confidentiality 365 days a year, day and night at 514-286-0831 or 514-222-5371 or 1-800-747-2622. Do not hesitate to use the service. I've used it. Again, the phone number is 514-286-0831, 514-222-5371, or 1-800-747-2622. Gina Cho, what is to come? Conferences, teaching, another book, anything you want to share with our audience? I don't know what's in your agenda for the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, so I'm starting to do more in-person training again, which I'm really excited about. We'll see about a new book soon. But the primary event that I'm offering is an ongoing daily pause session, which is just 10 minutes every day at 9:30 Pacific time. And you can learn all about that on my website, ginacho.com.
Super. We can buy your book. I checked before. We can buy your book on Amazon.ca. That's where I got it. I got it as a Kindle ebook. And it's also available in Quebec at Chapters Indigo. It's on the website. It's available. So it's not exactly a problem to get a hold of it. Gina, thank you so much. What do you want to tell us before you go?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I think the one thing that I want to leave the listeners with is to, ask that question. How can I be a good friend to myself, and offering yourself compassion?
Thank you. As for my thanks, again, obviously, thank you, Gina Cho, for being the first American lawyer on our show. And thank you for sharing the ever so important and necessary realization that lawyers also need to take care of their mental health to thrive in our law practices. I hope you liked the experience today, dear listener. I have done the research for this episode because it was not only interesting, but important to have firsthand information by reading the book. Trust me, it was not a chore. It was a complete pleasure to read. So thanks to me for this one. Thank you to the late René Gagnon for the music. Thank you, Sergio Travaglione of Music Red One for the equipment. And thank you, Constance, who is lately being the conductor of 4 more creators for 4 new shows launching within the next few months on Rivercast Media. Thank you, Constance. Get some rest. Meditate, maybe. I'll put you in touch with Gina. Dear colleagues, you know what I'm about to say. In English this time, subscribe. Simply search for Question de Preuve on any podcast site, podcatcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to a podcast. If you're not so podcast savvy, then go to the Question de Preuve section on the rivercastmedia.com website and listen to us from there. All of our episodes are there to listen for free. If you need continuing education hours, go to the site and register there to complete your hours. We are approved by the Quebec Bar Association, La Chambre des Notaires du Québec, and because of this, any legal professional across Canada can have our podcast accredited. Thank you for your attention. Today's keyword is reconnect. RECONNECT, reconnect. It will be necessary to obtain your continuing education attestation. I'm open to your comments, suggestions, and ideas. Contact me to come and discuss subjects that concern you, that are important to you, and that advance the practice of law. I am at HR Martin on Twitter and at info@rivercastmedia.com. Question de Preuve and Rivercast Media are on all social networks. This podcast is a production of Rivercast Media SA, and remember, everything is a question of proof.
All right.